Now, for more on this, we are joined by Yakov Lapin. He's a military and strategic affairs analyst. And Yakov, let's really break this story down a little bit more. This is the first time I've heard, at least, of Iran building missile production facilities around Israel's borders. How much have we seen, when it comes down to Iranian support to these nations, turn into full-scale productive capacity?
This has been a central concern on the Israeli intelligence radar for a number of years. The ability of Iran not only to transfer weapons into Syria and then from there to Hezbollah and from there to militias that it set up in Syria, but also to turn Syrian weapons production centers into Iranian weapons production centers. These joint centers are creating precision-guided missiles, and we know that Syria has cruise missiles already installed and pointed at Israel from Syrian territory. And we know that SIRS has been struck repeatedly by reported Israeli airstrikes in recent years. So Gantz is basically underlying some of the key aspects that have been playing out in this shadow war between Israel and Iran on Syrian territory for a number of years.
Now, on the topic of Iran, we've been hearing a lot of back and forth over the past couple of days about the nuclear deal. That's really been taking center stage. And Israel and the United States, there might be a little daylight between the two right now, as Israel says there's no way that anyone's going back to a nuclear deal. The United States saying we're not willing to rule that out just yet. Blinken saying that Iran's unwilling or unable to finalize nuclear talks. Where does the world really stand when it comes down to reaching some sort of nuclear deal with Iran?
Yes, that's not clear right now where things stand, because we don't know how much of this is negotiations posturing, primarily by Iran, to try and squeeze further concessions. And if Iran sees that that effort doesn't work, then it could come back to some kind of compromise text and sign a deal, or whether really the talks are in long-term jeopardy. And the reason that's not clear, I think, is because the answer to that question is currently only in the mind of the Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei, and perhaps to members of the Iranian Supreme National Security Council, who jointly controlling the Iranian negotiators, and they're the ones who really know the answer to this question. They're the ones who have to make this decision. And until we have further signals, we just don't know whether this is posturing or whether the deal is really in serious jeopardy.
And I want to move on from one advanced weapon to another advanced weapon. We're hearing Iran boast they have a new drone developed specifically to target Tel Aviv and other central Israeli cities. What can we actually make of this? Is this more bluster on the part of the regime, or is this something serious?
It's both, in my view. The regime never misses an opportunity to threaten Israel with its capabilities, and at the same time, it is developing a range of capabilities, from ballistic missiles to cruise missiles to long-range drones, that are designed not only to enable Iran to threaten Israel directly from Iranian territory, but also to nourish its network of proxies with these weapons as well. Anything that comes out of an Iranian weapons factory is also likely to end up one day in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq. So this is Iran attempting to deter Israel and also to signal its intention of continuing its conventional proxy building activities, which also includes arming them with these offensive weapons. And Israel, it has to be said, is developing world-class air defenses and offensive capabilities and intelligence capabilities to deal with this threat.
And all this really highlights a sort of dilemma that's facing Israel in regards to advanced weapons and the nuclear deal. Because on one hand, if the nuclear deal goes through, it frees up hundreds of billions of dollars for Iran to use to build these facilities, to fund more advanced weapons, and to funnel them towards the various threats in the region and the proxy militias. If there's no nuclear deal, Iran gets to move full steam ahead without even needing to make a pretense on their nuclear weapons program. What's Israel's winning move here?
That's right. This is the dilemma, the main dilemma, and this has caused the Israeli defense establishment to basically split up into two schools of thought. One which views a signature on a revived deal as being definitely the worst scenario because of the things that you've just described and because of the fear that eventually Iran would become a nuclear threshold state by the end of this decade, essentially. And there's another school of thought that says perhaps it's still better for them to sign the deal because it would give Israel some time to prepare for a potential future Iranian nuclear breakout move. So this debate is very much center stage in the Israeli defense establishment, and Israel is formulating a number of options for each scenario, and that is, what is taking place behind closed doors in talks between American officials and Israeli officials, creating scenarios, looking for agreements, and trying to find ways to move forward together, the United States and Israel, across a range of these scenarios.
Okay, and we have less than a minute left, so I want to just bring in one additional angle here. Just yesterday, we heard Mossad chief David Barnea come out and say that deal or no deal, Israel's ability to act, Mossad's ability to act against Iran will not be hindered. Are there these sort of clandestine operations, and what capacity do they really have to operate against Iran?
Well, we can only go on international and foreign media reports. And if those reports are anything to go by, then it appears as if the Mossad has an extensive ability to operate on Iranian soil, not only to sabotage nuclear sites. We've also seen reports of IRGC officials and Quds Force officials kidnapped on Iranian soil, questioned, confessing to various activities against Israel, and then released. And that's a very humiliating psychological blow to the Iranian regime. So the Mossad has flexed its muscles in Iran, according to these reports, and it's saying very clearly that deal or no deal, Iran has no immunity as far as the Mossad and the state of Israel is concerned going forward.
Thank you very much, Yakov. That was a good way to break this all down, and we're going to see where this all goes.